What is up and welcome back to Working Hard. Today's guest is someone who has quite literally redefined creativity and colour in the beauty industry and has done it all with an energy and authenticity that's actually impossible not to love. Made by Mitchell founder Mitchell Halliday. Starting out as a self-taught makeup artist, sharing his looks from his bedroom in Manchester, he's grown into one of the most exciting names in beauty today, all before the age of 25. Not only has he built a global following of millions, but he's also achieved something so difficult, creating a brand that is a true cult favourite in a sea of legacy brands. His products sell out in minutes, and he was the first person to make $1 million in a day on TikTok Shop. We're obviously going to get right into the strategy that's got him here, how to blow up your own business, but also we really get into how to be unafraid and to be truly and authentically yourself, and why being told you're too much can actually be your superpower. Before we get into my chat with Mitchell, I would be so grateful if you could subscribe to my channel. The deal is that you subscribe, and then I put out a super interesting episode every single Monday to improve your life and start your week on the right foot. This episode is sponsored by Loop, which I am absolutely thrilled about because I genuinely have a pair on me at all times. I'm someone who loves to work in a busy cafe, but I'm also cursed with a brain that loves to latch onto the conversations of absolutely everyone around me and start listening to them like a podcast, and that is where these lifesavers come in. These are the Loop Engage earplugs that I always have in my handbag for when I'm working on the go or even on busy days in the office. They basically filter background noise using an acoustic channel, which means that you can lock into your work while staying present. They do this without any sort of electronics either, so I think they might actually be magic. They also come with 8 different size options to make sure they fit your ear perfectly, because I don't usually fit earplugs, but these ones work perfectly. They don't give you that weird kind of blocked ear sensation that I get from other earplugs that I've tried before as well. I'm genuinely such a fan of the brand. I could go on about them for hours and hours, but we have a podcast to get into, so I will just tell you instead that you can get 20% off with the code LOOPXGRACE. Mitchell, are you currently more working hard or hardly working?
Working hard, but then I try and kid myself to being hardly working because
Love that.
this is my dream, like that. I'm so blessed to be able to do what I do every single day. So yeah, I don't like to always see it as a job. It is obviously a job, and it's a very hard job, a very tasking job. But I really do try and just remember the days when I first started doing makeup and how much I loved it then, how much of a hobby it was then. And I try and just remind myself of that. So
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that a lot of people can probably do that a bit more. I think there's, what is it on TikTok at the moment where it's like, I saw one the other day that it was basically saying like, I'm so stressed about my current issues that I forget how much past me would absolutely kill to be where I am now.
And I think that's so normal. That's like, we live in such a fast-paced world. And I think the world of social as well is so fast-paced, which is obviously where my brand is based, like yours as well. So it is tricky, and it is hard to remind yourself of that, but it is so important to remind yourself of that because, again, I look back and I'm like, how the hell did I get here? That's like truly like only coming from gratitude. So it's just reminding yourself of that gratitude, which isn't always easy.
No, it's not always easy. And I find myself having to do it a lot, like having to constantly be like, yes, this is stressful, but also this is the type of stress you wished for.
Absolutely.
So let's like try and enjoy it somehow. Like obviously you're not going to enjoy all the shit, and we don't need like toxic positivity. But I do think it's important also to just be like, this is a great problem to have. You would have killed for this problem years ago. So I like the idea of like working that, hardly working into that mindset. I'm going to take that forward because I very much
It's
need
something that I think everyone, whether you have a business or whether it's something that you have a job and it's more of a 9 to 5, but you love that job. It's something that we can all implement into our normal lives every day.
Yeah, love that. And I'd like to go back to the very beginning and your kind of origin story of where you are now. Do you remember the first makeup product you ever owned?
Yes, I do. One that I actually owned and one that I didn't steal from my mum's makeup bag. So the one that I stole from my mum's makeup bag was the Max Factor Facefinity Duo like powder. It had a powder and a sponge. That was the first thing that I stole. I don't know what I was setting because I was probably 13 years old. I had dry skin, so I don't know why I needed powder. But hey ho, I just felt I wanted to feel my fantasy, I guess. The first product I bought was the Illamasqua brow cake, if you ever remember that. And I had basically shaved all my eyebrows off. I'm not joking, the full thing. This is while I was in school. And every day I'd paint my eyebrows back on. Don't understand the logic. Why did I want to make my mornings longer? But yeah, every morning I'd paint them back on and get to school and be told to wipe them off. So yeah, that was my first ever makeup product I bought.
Oh, and then you'd have to go around with their eyebrows on.
I'd find a way to keep them on. I'd find a way. Yeah.
That's so funny. That's such a funny thing for them to have an issue
Oh,
with.
no.
You're like, these are actually my eyebrows.
I'm
Are
like,
you like,
please.
are you saying they don't look
Well, the funny
realistic?
thing is as well, I was actually a head boy at the time as well. So I was like, listen, do you want your head boy really walking around with no eyebrows? And my head of year, Mr. Costin, he was called, great man. He had like a soft spot for me. So yeah, it was
Oh,
good.
I love that. And before we get further into your makeup journey, am I right in thinking that you were on X Factor?
Oh God. Yes, you are. You're correct.
Go on, tell us the story.
So way before I was even interested in makeup, I've always had such a love for music. Loved singing, loved performing. So before I even started doing makeup, I actually used to sing all the time, but I used to go to like old men's pubs, clubs, social clubs, all those kind of things. And I'd sing there every Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I sang pretty much in so many different environments. I can't promise that everyone was listening to me, but I still loved it. So that was what I was doing at the time. And then I went to music college. So through music college, we got scouted. There was a girl group and a boy group that got scouted to basically go into X Factor and audition, get fast-tracked through a few of the different levels before you actually see them on TV. And I was put into a boy band with 3 lads that I'd literally never met before in my life. We had to pretend that we went to like dance club together or something. It was hilarious. And yeah, that was my X Factor journey. And then we got to. It was the year that Matt Terry won, if you remember.
Yeah,
Matt Terry had won that year, and it was the first year that they brought in 6 chair challenge, which was absolutely ruthless. So we made it to 6 chair challenge. We got a chair. It was taken away from us. We were brought back to then sit on a chair. It was then taken away from us. So after that, it was so traumatic. Because again, I think back then, I thought a show like X Factor was a talent show. And yes, it has elements of that, but it's an entertainment show. So I was vexed that I wasn't being seen for my talent and I was just being used for entertainment. But that is just the harsh reality of it. You know, I was like, woe is me. I was about 17 years old. And then, yeah, I got kicked off X Factor. And that's when, around that same time, one of my friends had just opened a salon. And I basically started working there on a weekend. And the rest is history. I had interest in makeup because I loved the extraness of it, the transformation of it. I was fascinated by that. But yeah, then I started picking up some brushes and the rest is history. And yeah, thank God I'm an X Factor reject because I won't be here today without it. So, perspective, hey?
A big part of the growth story.
Yes, it really is.
I can't imagine how like that experience must have been at 17, especially when you're like trying to work out what you're doing with your life and you're like, oh, this is the big wide world. Like, I hate it.
And I think as well, I was trying to really figure out who I was as well at that time. So I remember I've always been me. I've always been a big gay boy. Like, that's just how I am. I love that about myself. I do now anyway. But I remember when I was put into the boy band, obviously we had to have a boy band look, which was so far away from what I wanted to look like.
Yeah.
So then I'd come into that. I was trying so hard to be this straight-looking lad. And after that, I was just kind of like, whoa, that doesn't even work for me. And that's something that is so accepted, more so accepted than being the gay guy, you know? So then after that, I was just kind of lost into this whole idea of, well, if I can't be accepted as the straight boy, how am I ever going to be accepted as the gay boy? And again, so young at the time. But I look back and I'm like, wow, I didn't even know the half of it because I'd never in a million years in that moment could have thought that I would be so accepted for who I am now and so celebrated for who I am now. But yeah, it just takes time.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I always think that when we look back at our kind of formative experiences and what really showed us who we are, I always think it's so interesting how those specific things, like you can just see in hindsight, who knows, you could have had an experience a few years later where you were like, do you know what, I'm just going to try and present as more straight, or I'm going to try and present as more this. And actually you had like a very quick, like, knockdown.
No,
like,
literally,
we're
I was
not
like, okay, this isn't for me then.
Exactly.
First of all, I should not be in a boy band. Second of all, stop wearing like backward snapbacks and thinking that you look cool. Stop doing that. But yeah.
Love that. So can you talk to me a little bit about the moment that it all blew up? I know that Jeffree Star and Nikki Tutorials had a role to play.
Yeah, so at the time, I'd been working in the salon for about 2 years at this point, become really, really busy. And this is in the time pre-COVID where everyone, if you went to the pub on a weekend, you had your makeup done. If you went to a funeral, you had your makeup done. Everyone was getting the makeup done. It was a different time. It was the best time to work in a salon. No, literally, I used to do people's makeup for funerals and I'd be like, oh, I don't really know what to talk about right now. But hey ho, at least they came to me and wanted to look the best. So Although, that's just a different time that the makeup world was in. And I became so busy. And that really took up my weekends. So then I kind of wanted to flip it a little bit. And I had a real interest on social media from other makeup artists wanting to learn what I was doing. So then through the week, I started to teach one-to-one classes. And then through that, I actually had time because I was doing a little bit of eyeshadow. And then my student would do another little bit of eyeshadow. So as they were doing it, I would film it. And then I'd compile it all. And some days I'd do like 4 students in a day. So I'd be posting maybe 5-6 videos a day of different looks. And it just gained a lot of traction because the looks that I were doing back then were very, very out there. It was very different to the editorial kind of glams that were kind of popular at that time and respected as well. So I'd started doing all these crazy looks. It was almost like putting like a drag makeup look onto a feminine face. So it looked a little bit softer, but still looked very heavy, which was my kind of thing back then. Still love it to this day. And from there, I gained so much traction on social and ended up being reached out to by Nikki Tutorials. And then she asked me to fly out to Amsterdam because that's where she lives. And she flew me and my best friend out. Honestly, I think, again, must have been 17, 18 at this time. Just imagining what that must feel like.
You're living a big life for a 17-year-old.
Oh my God. I've lived many different lives. Honestly, it was truly like a time. And I was from this little council estate in Bolton. Never really, I don't think I'd even grow up going on holiday. We'd go to a caravan. That's what we'd do on the weekends or if we went away on the 6 weeks holidays. So all of this was so new. Being flown somewhere was incredibly exciting. And went there, we did a video, and we'd filmed a video with the KKW and the Mario palette. Do you remember when that came out?
I remember that. I had the KKW stick.
Yes,
the
exactly.
stick.
It was iconic. And again, another time completely where the makeup sphere was at the time. And Mario had basically done like this video, really just taking the mick out of Kim. And basically, she had this towel on her head, and he basically swiped 4 eyeshadows onto her cheek of a beautiful finished glam. And she didn't know that was going to happen. It went really viral. So I basically then recreated that on Nikki with the same palette and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it went from there. Kim's reposted it, Mario's reposted it, and the video went huge. My following obviously started to grow massively. And then a few weeks later, I got invited to Mario's masterclass. So at this point, I'm just kind of like trying to network my way through the industry and kind of, I was so naive at this point to even what I was doing. I was just like, oh my God, I just want to meet all these people that I've looked up to since I started doing makeup. And it kind of just evolved. And then I ended up filming with Jeffree Star, which honestly changed my life in so many ways. That opened up doors that I don't think would have ever been opened up. I can't lie about that situation. And me and Jeffree became really close. We worked together many, many times. We went on tours, teaching masterclasses all over Europe and all over the UK. And that was just a time that I look back on and I'm like, what the hell? How did I end up there? Did I end up?
What kind of year was that? Because I'm thinking of like the heyday of makeup YouTubers. Because I used to watch makeup YouTubers like I watch people vlog now, like as a very like comfort watch based thing. I was not doing like a full face beat, and I'd be sat there like like watching just
like
taking in the whole thing,
makeup reviews, all that kind of stuff.
I'm like, okay, I'll go buy these 17
so I'd
things.
say that was like 2018, 2019.
Yes.
For me, my peak in that world was 2018, 2019.
That's fully when I was watching it.
Yeah.
I was like sat, like every time they had a new video coming out, I was like...
Me too. And then it was so weird because I'd gone from watching all these videos to being in these videos. And that was where it was just so wild. It was just a different time of social media in as a whole. But I think I was a part of that time. And that's really made me the human that I want to be today. It's made me realize the kind of platform that I want, and it's kind of made me realize to not always think that being problematic is the best because it's going to get you views. Sometimes I'd rather have less views and be less problematic. So I think it's taught me a lot over the years.
That's really interesting, I think, because as you say, like so many people who get onto social media might truly think that whatever you can do to get the most views is good. And I don't mean like, don't mind doing things that might be a bit problematic or might not be something that they, that is authentically them or whatever to get views. And I think you being thrown so fast into the deep end and receiving all of it, like even like tabloid coverage, like that's crazy.
I was like,
that must have just been like, and that must have just been like, oh, okay, this is not that's not the full extent of what I want. I want to
Yeah.
be able to build a life where I have the freedom and the luxury and
Mm-hmm.
all of this that, of course, lots of people aspire to. And of course, you were aspiring to at the time. But it's interesting to have that lesson so early that
Yeah.
actually, like, it's not at any cost.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I was probably loving the tabloid covers and all that at the time. It was like exciting to me. I was a young kid, and again, it's, you know, sometimes when we grow up, I'm sure we've all said it at some point, I want to be famous. I want to be famous. I want to be this. I want to be that. So then when you start getting those little bits of being known, you think, oh my God, this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like. And then it was just, there was so much that happened in social media as a whole that I just kind of thought, right, this isn't actually me. I'm actually a very peaceful person. I like to just get on with my own stuff. I like to do my job and then go to bed and, you know, like kind of switch off from that. So yeah, it was a great lesson that I got taught very early on. And I think that has now really allowed me to build what I'm building now with Made by Mitchell, something that is just based around community and just about making people feel good rather than, you know, always getting clicks and views and all that kind of stuff. Even though they are good and they really help as a business, sometimes it's what are you sacrificing for those clicks and those views and those sales. And I just think sometimes not everything should be sacrificed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And so when did it go from, I guess, you sharing your content to really evolving into you deciding that you wanted to start your own brand with your own makeup?
Yeah, so 2019 was a big year for me in the sense of it was where I really started to turn my love for makeup into a business. I didn't really realize I was doing that at the time. I was just kind of accepting jobs, doing things that I'd never done before. I traveled all around the world. I did something like a 42 country tour in over 6 months, from Latin America to Europe to Asia. It was a wild time, and I did it all by myself, negotiated it all by myself, traveled all by myself. It was a wild time to be alive. So I'd done all that, and during those same times, I'd started to get traction from a lot of brands that wanted to work with me because, you know, I was working with the biggest names in my industry at the time. So started to collaborate on products with certain brands, and, you know, I had many great experiences with those brands, but there was some things that I just didn't really enjoy and some things that I didn't feel very fulfilled with. So then at that point, that's when I just decided, okay, I need to step back here. I did like 5 product collabs within the space of 4 months, which was actually crazy. Like normally someone would space them out over a year or 2. Me personally, I was just like, oh my God, let's run like the clappers.
Yeah.
I didn't have a clue. I didn't know a routine to it. Again, because I negotiated every last deal at that point myself. So at that point, I thought, okay, I have done all this, but I'm not really having too much to show for it at this point because I didn't know how to invest, didn't know all of that stuff. So at that point, I then thought, okay, maybe this is the time to actually do something for myself, and actually create my own legacy in a way, which again, I didn't really know that was going to happen at that point. I just wanted to create something that was solely me and was solely my idea and was all under my control. And through one of my collabs that I'd done, I had met my business partner and manufacturer. So through that, I ended up being opened up to a whole other world of how to actually create cosmetics. And that is where the journey of Made by Mitchell originally started. And that's why I'm very thankful to every single one of my collabs, even when it wasn't necessarily the best experience, because it shaped me into being the businessman that I am today, but also into understanding what I want out of something. And I wouldn't have really understood that without the things that didn't necessarily go to plan, you know?
Right, of course. And was there any part of you that kind of was aware of how much volume you were selling for these brands when it wasn't necessarily going into your pocket?
For a lot of them, yeah, because a lot of them were very straight up and a lot of them were very, you know, just as brands do. And they've got like an obligation to show you what they're selling. But there was the odd one where I didn't always feel like I was being told very honestly what was going on. And that was where I decided to step away from it, because rather than me sit there and bash someone, I'd rather just kind of remove myself.
Yeah.
And just take it as a lesson. That is truly what those days were. And I've learned so much about my self-worth as well and about what I bring to the table. And I think that I really credit that to all of those collabs, and that's how I've been able to build such an incredible team, but also an incredible partnership, not just with me and my team, but also with me and my consumer now as well. So yeah, I'm very grateful for all of it, even the bad bits that weren't so enjoyable, you know?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it also gives you this insight when you are really paying attention to the brands you're working with and the products you're promoting and all of this and what actually sells well for your audience. That would have been such valuable information for you actually starting your business, just in terms of like, oh, okay, actually when we do lip glosses, it does 10 times better, or it has more of a propensity to go viral than when we do something where you can't see the direct or the immediate change or whatever it might be.
But then at the same time, I would more so wanting to know, okay, how many have we sold of everything? How much money did we make? Because that was kind of at that time that's all I could really measure the success of it from, because that's all I was being told, you know? So going into actually starting my own brand, that was kind of how I started it in my first place as well, because it was just like, how much money did we make in 30 minutes? That kind of thing. Whereas now it's a completely different thing, because money that you can make in 30 minutes sometimes doesn't necessarily measure the success of a product.
Sure.
It just kind of can be a viral product in that moment. And then everyone might receive that product and hate it. And then everyone hates the product. So it's a real spin around that you've got to do. So yeah, now it's a very different situation of how I look at how to build a successful product. But I've only really taught myself that through actually having Made by Mitchell, not necessarily in the collabs beforehand.
And so what was the first product you ever created?
So we started off with a really big product line. Obviously cosmetics, like the MOQ on cosmetics is pretty high. We can't just create like 50 eyeshadow palettes.
Sure.
Like we were working on like thousands and thousands of products. And we started off with 2 eyeshadow palettes, 6 blushes, which everyone was like, what the hell is a blush? We started off
You're
with
like, just you wait.
Just you wait. A brush set, a mirror, and then some makeup artist luggage as well. So it was a very, very big launch for an indie brand that didn't really have much gauge on how big it was actually going to be. And then I remember we'd launched our brand on I think it was the 25th of October. 25th of October. And at this point, it was October 2020. So we was all on our dining tables launching this huge brand that was going to go to become a multi-million-pound brand, which we never really realised. And we're launching it on our table, and I remember my team that were in their kitchens rang me and they said, you've just made your first £100,000 in 30 minutes. And me and my boyfriend at the time and my 2 best friends, we all lived together at the time, we were just like, and that was just, I'll always remember that, because it was a time of complete naivety where I didn't really think it was going to go that well, and I didn't think it would go that fast. But also, I look back at it as well, because even though it was so successful on initial launch, I thought that was going to be the trajectory of it from there on out. Sure. But I didn't realize there would be peaks and troughs and bumps in the road along the way. You know, when you get like a good day like that, you think, oh my God, I'm set. This is it. I can put my feet up now. But that was the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, no, I mean, real.
Yeah.
I understand that well.
Very real.
And is it true that the iconic lime that you're now known for was actually a mistake?
Yes, so it was meant to be banana yellow, which I look back and I'm like, what? Why was I thinking that? But when the colour was printed onto one of my makeup brushes, it was banana yellow on the bottom part of the brush, so the wooden, the handle, and then the ferrule, which actually holds all the bristles in, was made out of metal, so it translated differently. So I'd got my sample back, 2 different colours, and I was like, oh my God, that is made by Mitchell. And now everyone thinks it's made by Mitchell Green, even though we don't own the colour. We just kind of brought it to life.
Oh, I absolutely love that.
Yeah, so it was a complete accident, but sometimes accidents are the best things that can happen.
And what's your approach now to creating a viral product, I guess? Because you've created lots of viral products, and I can imagine you now have a pretty consolidated view of what actually it takes to be a viral product.
So I think for me, for example, like my curve case, it's an insane product. There's nothing like it on the market. We've sold millions all over the world. It's insane. But when I created that, I truly created it for myself. I created it from my kit, and I created it to make something easier for me, to create a solution for me. And when it first came out, it had a really, really great response. It was really great. But for me, I was thinking it was going to be makeup artists that would be buying this product over the everyday makeup wearer. And I got a real shock because at the time, makeup artists weren't really buying it because they thought, you know, it's in this green packaging. Makeup artist products are normally in black packaging, silver, you know, a bit more minimal in a way.
Demure.
Demure, which is just not me. I will never be demure, and I'm cool with that.
This trend is not for me.
No, it's just not for me. I'm not really into a trend. I like what makes me feel good, you know? So anyway, all of the makeup, everyday makeup wearers started to buy the product. And then what I really noticed was it was those people that were influencing the makeup artists to buy my product, which I just found really weird because they weren't being influenced by a makeup artist. They were being influenced by the TikTokers that do makeup on themselves. So yeah, I think at the time when I created that product, I wasn't really in the know that it was going to become viral. Or I do think the curve case now is very iconic. You know, some people hate seeing it on the timelines, but I'm like, sorry about it. I can't stop them from making videos. So yeah, it's become a really iconic product. And I think from the curve case, it's really taught me that with a product, for it to become viral and for it to become known amongst the masses, it has to solve a problem. And I think that is how I will always approach any of my cosmetics creations from now on, from that point on, to be fair. Because before that, I was kind of just creating products that, oh yeah, this works for me, I love this. But now it's about creating a bit of a system to a product. And I launched a complexion line, and most people will be like, I love this foundation, but I don't know what concealer to use with it. So I created a 48 shade foundation range, a 36 shade concealer range, and a 18 shade primer range that were all designed to be used together. So that is how I will always approach my creation of a product now, rather than it just being like, okay, this foundation works really well with a concealer that isn't out yet. I would always rather wait and bring it all out together. So then the solution is all there, you know? So I think it's about creating a solution, especially when it comes to cosmetics as well, because cosmetics are attached to so many more things other than just vanity. It's about confidence. It's about, you know, skin texture sometimes. And we want to cover that skin texture sometimes, whether some people want to admit that or not. So I think for me, it's just always about creating something that can be a solution to someone else's dislike into something that they have, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I've always been such a big proponent for product as marketing. So when your product is good enough, it becomes its own marketing. And also, if you this is like a test I always do for our product. If there was a way that you would like describe over the dinner table, like this one product you really love, then it can become something viral. Like it can just be, as you say, it can be the texture of it, or it can be like for our stuff with Tala, it might be the built-in bra aspect or the fact that it doesn't dig in one place or whatever. If you could describe that and feel genuinely like fanatical about it, then it can be a viral product. It's not about it just looking a certain way. And I always so believe in that, because I think now we are very much in the era of people being able to, like, your product, yes, you could make it viral, but actually for it to be viral, it needs to be supported by lots of other people.
Absolutely.
So it needs to genuinely do something that is aside from just being like aesthetically known for whatever reason. And yeah, I really stand by that. And I also think that with cosmetics, as you said, MOQs are so high that you're going to have people be repeat purchasers if you want a good business at all.
Absolutely.
So it's like, yes, you might have a big platform, and I think people often look at celebrity or influencer makeup brands or brands in general and think, okay, but of course you were going to make that viral because you're an influencer. It's like, cool, we wouldn't get through a fraction of our stock if people weren't rebuying it.
Oh,
like we
absolutely.
physically couldn't. And so I always think that's quite interesting when it comes to building an actual robust, replicable, scalable business.
That has time on it as well, and that isn't just going to be a one buy. And again, I've created a product that most people probably wouldn't need 4 bronzers and 4 blushes, but somehow people keep buying it because they love the product and they love how much easier it makes their day-to-day tasks in the morning, or even just playing around with makeup, which so many people do because that's their therapy. So yeah, I think it's a real standout, the curve case, because it's kind of meant to go against their odds of being like, oh yeah, you would rebuy this and rebuy this, because there's 4 bronzers in it. So if you run out of one, you go on to the next one.
Yeah.
You know, but obviously some people love that specific shade. And again, for me, it's also about understanding that I am a makeup artist. I have been a makeup artist for nearly a decade now, which makes me feel physically ill to say that. But I do create the products for me. So you know, not all of my products are best-selling products. There is products that are only bought by certain people, like the Armor Pro products, and I'm okay with that. I can sometimes take the hit on that when one of my other products is doing so well, because to me, it's not just about everything selling out all the time. I actually don't always think that is a great business model either, for everything to sell out, because what are you then going to do? And there's been so many times where we thought we ordered enough, but then we've not, and then there's been 2-3 months where we've not had that stock, and then, you know, the TikTok especially moves so fast. Someone else has found their favorite cream bronzer. So unless you're fulfilling that, it's actually not good. And I think also the other thing about TikTok, especially TikTok Short, because they are the two different entities, you actually never know when your product will go viral. Someone might buy your product and it might be a lip gloss, it might be an eyebrow product, and it might have sold 60 units. And then within those 6 units, it might be one of the biggest influencers in the country that then does a video with it and tags it. So it is, you just never know. And I think now we're at a point, we've got such a huge product line, hundreds of products at this point. And I'd say our top 5 products are really the driver of the company, because they're in such high demand. A lot of them I kind of create just because I love to create. And that is sometimes the beauty of kind of keeping your business integrity, in a sense of not just doing everything so it sells out. Like sometimes I know I've created a green lipstick. I know not everyone wants to wear a green lipstick, but that just does something to me, and I will use the hell out of that green lipstick. And it's just a great feeling knowing that you're using your own product that you've developed and you've formulated, which you will completely know as well. So yeah, it's. I think there's different ways of looking at business as a whole, and for me, the main part of my business, it's about making myself feel good, and also about making other people feel good. So whether that's, for example, I created lip kits last year, I think it was, and one of them was a black lip kit. It's one of our best-selling lip kits of all time.
Really?
Sells better than the nudes, sells better than the reds. A black lip kit. It sold I think we sold 20,000 units in about 2 days of a black lip kit. Insane, absolutely insane. But again, it's the demand is there for all those funky products, and we've created products for those people that don't usually have products made for them.
Right.
You know?
So that's such a lesson in truly knowing your customer as well, because I can imagine if you'd had like a huge investor in the company who has built all of these other cosmetics companies, or someone who comes in to help you on your product range when actually they're in a much more traditional thing. It's like, yeah, this wouldn't work for other businesses, but yes, it does work for ours. And truly trusting your gut and knowing that you built this for all of those yous out there, and they do exist, and there is a market for it.
And that's what I always say. It's like, don't feel like you're the only one that wants to be noticed, because like that is just complete proof that I've never heard anything like that. 20,000 black lip kits in like 2 days. I actually remember I mustn't have been looking at the app that day or those 2 days, and I remember seeing loads of comments being like, please restock the black lip kit, and I was like, so I rang one of the team and I said, can we put the stock back in please? And she was like, oh no, there's no stock left. I was like, okay, maybe we need more black lip kits then. So yeah, it's just your brand identity is so important, because it's your company identity at the end of the day, and it's the people that will be identifying with your brand. So yeah, it's a real circle. It really is.
And you've spoken before about how, despite the last few years of kind of huge success for the business, you had what you call your kind of flop era, which I think is really important to talk about, because I think people love to speak about success at the point that, you know, that success has happened, and not kind of, it's hard to really own when it wasn't necessarily doing what it needed to do, or business was slow, or whatever it might be. Could you talk to us a little bit about what that was like and what was kind of happening in that time?
Yeah, so October 2020, we launched the brand. And then around 6 months later, we had an incredible first 6 months, insane. And then we launched on a retailer that I'd worked with since the start of my career, Beauty Bay. And Beauty Bay had a real infrastructure that we didn't have at the time. We still don't have an infrastructure like that. We're still very small compared to Beauty Bay. So we launched on there, and obviously the customer would rather shop on Beauty Bay. They get cheaper shipping. If you're an international customer, you'd sometimes get free shipping. They also had a point system, so you're paying for a Made by Mitchell product, but it's adding up to your Beauty Bay points. So we basically did wholesale with Beauty Bay, and then I'd say around 3 months after that, our website was just stale. And I was like, what the hell has happened? We'd gone from having a really successful first 6 months. We was also still in the midst of lockdown as well. And you remember the start of lockdown, everyone was online shopping. And then I'd probably say 2021, mid 2021, people stopped online shopping. It was kind of like, okay, we're bored now. You know, we've been buying candles for, I don't know, a year and a half. There's only so many you can buy. So, which was, I was very guilty of that myself. And 3 months after we'd launched on Beauty Bay, it went really silent. Our website was doing just terribly. And we still had a hell of a lot of stock. As I said, the MOQ when it comes to cosmetics, especially when you're doing all these custom features, are very, very high. And nothing was moving. And that probably went on for around 6 months. And I remember me and the team, we had a chat and we actually had the conversation about selling up and just giving up and being like, okay, where are we even going from here? And I was so adamant that this was my dream. This is my final journey when it comes to cosmetics. This is my last thing that I want to do. I want to keep at this for as long as I can remember and for as long as I can imagine. So really put my foot down and I said, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to do this. We're going to get back to what we were. And didn't just happen the day after. We still had a really bad few months after that. But then we actually hired Gab, who basically heads up all of our TikTok channel now. And Gab basically told us we need to get on TikTok. At the time, TikTok was kind of a bit about kids dancing and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't even on TikTok at the time. And it just wasn't for me. I was this Instagram guy. That's how I'd built my career. I was scared of becoming a small fish in a big pond again, to be honest. I'd built this huge audience on Instagram. And then when it came to the TikTok, I was starting from zero again. And I was so scared about that. Anyway, I didn't have a choice. Cut a long story short. We started on TikTok, started giving it a go. And TikTok Shop, maybe nearly 3 years ago now, approached us to start doing live streams with them. This was right at the start of TikTok Shop. No one was really doing it. And it was just one of those kind of opportunities where we was like, okay, this could be a lifeline. This could be where we can change it all. I kind of doubted it, I can't lie, because it was so new. I was like, how is this going to become big? How is TikTok Shop going to become something that everybody uses like they do today? So from there, we did our first ever TikTok Shop live stream. And at the time, I think we were doing around 20 orders a month, which is scary, really scary. For a small business, that might be a win, you know? And I really highly advise people that are doing 20 orders a month, really celebrate every single order you're getting at that time because you never know when it's going to just explode. Please don't feel like you're failing at that time.
Yeah,
just
but
don't
also
feel like
you bought inventory for a business that wasn't doing 20 orders
and
a
our
month, so
business
that's very
size
different.
that wasn't feasible for that. It wasn't long lasting and there was no longevity in that. But again, I do think at that time, you never know when your switch up is going to come because my switch up was about to come. So we did our first ever live, 20 orders a month at the time. And on our first 2 hour live, we did 20 orders on that 2 hour live. I came off the live and I was like, oh my God, we've just done what I would normally do in a month in 2 hours. And that's where we really started to see, okay, this could be something, even if it's not going to be huge, it's bigger than what we're doing now. It's about perspective, isn't it? Because again, I look back now and if I did 20 orders on a live now, I would be scared. But then I was so excited by it. And from that point on, it was just me and the team then that did creative work. So we didn't have anyone representing socials, no one creating content. It was just me, no one on the lives. And from that point on, I think I was probably live for about 2 years after that, straight, just every single day.
Just morning, night.
And we built a community that is just next to none. And we gained traction from retailers all over the world because of the virality that we were getting from going live and because of the accolades that we'd received from being live. And, you know, the $1 million in 12 hours, that it woke people up because at the start when we started TikTok or started TikTok Shop, a lot of people were saying, oh, this is really cringy, this is really tacky, this is going to do no good for your brand legacy. And I'll be honest, I owe it all to TikTok Shop when it comes to my brand legacy because now we're in a point, we just launched, we did Boots's biggest ever rollout last year, which was just insane, being a TikTok brand, you know, which we are, and I wear that crown now. But now this year we're going into over 700 spots in America, we're launching in Australia, and that has really only come from TikTok Shop making the world known of what Made by Mitchell is. So yeah, it's been a real journey, and you'd never, when you're going through the worst parts of your journey, you never think that they're going to turn into the best parts or help you turn into the best parts. Because if we weren't doing those 20 orders a month at that time, I would have never had even thought about going on TikTok. And imagine that never happened. Imagine where the brand would be now. Would it even still be here? You know,
Yeah.
would it be mine? Would it be elsewhere? You know, it would be a very different scenario.
Yeah, it's such a good lesson in taking opportunities, but also not necessarily like sniffing at where that next opportunity might come from, and just being able to try things, because that might not have worked, and it might not have worked, and or you know, you might have judged that as, yeah, that worked, but not well enough to throw everything into it. And I actually think that, you know, the times where I felt most rock bottom in my kind of business have been the times that have warranted then the most change, that have led to the biggest kind of uptick from that point onwards, or the biggest kind of redefinition of what we actually are as a business. And I think that is so incredibly important.
And also like you've just said, redefinition, like to be able to adapt. As a business in this society and in this time of where we're at in the world, you have to be easily adaptable, and you have to be down to sometimes switching things up. And I think because we've not necessarily had men in suits telling us that we have to do this or have to do that, I think that's given us the freedom to be able to just kind of ignore opinions and just go based off feeling. And, you know, not everything's worked out, of course. Not even everything on TikTok Shop has worked out. We've had some times where things haven't gone down so well. But the magic of just freely doing something that you think feels good at that time and in that moment has really brought Made by Mitchell out into the world in a way that I don't think would have ever have happened in the short time span that it's been. It's been across like a 2.5 years time span. And we've gone from a brand that sells 20 products a month to doing millions of orders, millions and millions. It's insane, and it's a worldwide brand, and that's a real accolade to just taking the risk sometimes and ignoring where people might doubt those risks, you know.
And what would your advice be to someone whose business now is currently in their quote unquote flop era?
In the flop era, embrace the flop era. Don't be too scared by the flop era, even if it is really scary. Don't let it back you away from the success that is waiting to come to you. I think you've got to really deep delve into your why. Like, why are you there? Not what are you there for? Why are you there for? And for me, my why was because this is my dream, you know? This is something I've always wanted to do. This is something that I've always built up for other people. I owed it to myself to follow it through. And I think that is a lot of people's whys. You're doing this. We're doing it for ourselves, aren't we? I'm doing this to make my life better. I'm doing it for my family. I'm doing it to make my little Mitchell, when he was a little kid, make his dreams come true. And in turn, that's making other people's dreams come true because it's opening up things to so many other people. But yeah, I think finding your why is a really important thing to do. And I think sometimes when you are in your flop era, that's the best time to find it. And once you've found it, you just have to constantly remind yourself of that why rather than your what, you know? I think it's very important.
Yeah. And what about anyone who's listening to this with a business who doesn't necessarily know how TikTok Shop works and is listening like, this might be the next thing for me. How does it work as a business?
Well, it's really funny as well, because if I was to look back about a year and a half ago, none of the big, you know, the household name brands would have been on TikTok Shop.
No way.
No way. The L'Oreal's, Estee Lauder, none of them would be on it because they'd think, oh God, TikTok Shop, you know, it had that kind of connotation to it. But now everyone's on it. Everyone. And it's really funny because I must get like an email every week from one of the big brands asking me to go and help them on the live streams. And I'm like, this is hilarious, because once upon a time we were like the laughingstock of the makeup world because we were on live 24/7 and all this kind of stuff. Now everyone else is doing it. So I think with TikTok Shop, it's an ever-changing platform. So it's very different now to what it was when I first started, because there was nobody really on it then. You know, we kind of pioneered a certain level for our own self that has then turned out for other people and other brands. But at TikTok Shop, cut a long story short, it's basically aiming to be an Amazon. So imagine Amazon, you can go on there, it's a marketplace of many, many products. So the amount of people that go onto the shop tab, not necessarily that will click on, say, you tag a product, and not necessarily that click on that, but the actual shop tab, it's like the second icon on the bottom of the screen. It's millions and millions of people a day, which just shows you how many people are actually tapping on that shop tab and actually going through with a sale on that shop tab. So I think when it comes to TikTok Shop, it's about really honing in on what kind of content you want to create for that platform. It's a very different platform to Instagram. It's very different to ads, all of those things that we use to generate sales. TikTok Shop to me is like one of the most authentic ways to shop sometimes, because it's in the moment. It's based on how you feel about that video or about that listing. So anyone that's coming onto it now, I think you've just got to really understand what you want to be seen as on TikTok. Do you want to be the affordable brand? Do you want to be more of a high-end brand? There's so many high-end brands on there now, and I think it's just shown people that that can happen. It doesn't just have to be people selling things for £1, which is, I think, the beautiful thing about what's gone on over the last few months, because everyone should really embrace this incredible platform that's been built, because it's not just built for a consumer, it's also built for a business, whether it's tiny or whether it's small. It really does, for me, help you as a business, and it helps you be seen and gives you the visibility that I truly believe not many other platforms can offer.
And how did you go from, I guess, launching on the platform and doing your first ever live stream to actually getting to, say, the $1 million in 12 hours? I think, I mean, I assume there was quite a lot of testing and learning and strategy that was put behind that, because you didn't just list your products on it and go on and do $1 million in your first one. So what would you say were the big things you implemented to actually effectively get to those higher numbers?
I think for me, it was the realization that I am my ads, I am my marketing, I am made by Mitchell. You know, I think using the founder as a face, I think, has become such a big thing on TikTok. And I think if you are someone that is willing to show your face on TikTok and really explain the story of what you are building, I think truly it's only going to go one way, because people will somehow become attached to what you are building. So that was what I realized very early on. People wanted to see me, and that was sometimes a bit of a curse rather than a blessing, because it meant that I could never come off live, and I'd be on live every day of my life. But you know, I had a mission, and I also had a lot to lose from the first time that we was in our flop era. I didn't want to go back there. I was adamant that that wasn't going to happen. And I basically would be live every single day. It's really about understanding. You almost script your own live. You script your own kind of, it's a bit like QVC. You script it, but in a very, very natural way. So I started to learn how to script and how to communicate without it being too much of a hard sell. And rather than saying, like, buy my product, it was kind of an even more in-depth way of me to be able to say to someone, this is why you should buy my product, because this is what it's going to do for you. So that was really what I had to teach myself over the years of, you know, many live streams. And then basically TikTok Shop eventually came to us. We were like TikTok Shop's #1 brand month after month after month. And they basically came to us and said, we'd love you to do a big live and do $500,000 in 12 hours. I was like, what the hell? We'd never done anything like that. The most we'd done before that, I think we did $2 million in a week. So I was like, $500,000 in 12 hours. That's not even a day. So I went back and forth with my team, and I was just kind of like, oh, what if it doesn't happen? You know, what if we get knocked off that number one spot, which is just, you know, I think sometimes ego is something that you just need to let go of. So I let go of it, and I thought, if we don't hit that $500,000, it's okay. We give it a go, and I'm sure we'll somehow shock ourselves, whether it's $500,000 or $200,000. That's still a hell of a lot of money. So we basically did the live. It was a 12-hour live, and I remember it was probably about 5 hours in, we'd got to $500,000. I was just like looking at my team, who were all behind the cameras, and they were like, shall we go for a million? Shall we go for a million? And I basically was like, what? Really?
You got a greedy
I'm like,
scout.
Stop. Because it's me that has to do this.
Sleep.
But then as soon as we hit $500,000, it was just like, every time I'd look, it had gone up by like $50,000. And that's really where we ended up hitting the $1 million. And it was something that I look back on now, and I just think, thank God I took that risk back in the day. And thank God I didn't listen to the people that thought that TikTok Shop was just a joke, you know, because that doesn't sound like a joke to me.
Yeah, and also every business is so different. I think that really understanding that, and understanding, like, you might look at this one other business and be like, yeah, but their sales are here. Like, I spent so much at the beginning of my journey as a founder looking at other businesses and being like, oh, but their sales are like this, so I should be more like them. And it's like, maybe you want to be more like them financially,
Yeah.
but you don't need to be more like them as a brand. Like,
As a brand,
because
yeah.
that's not right for them or because that is right for them doesn't make it right for you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a big lesson, because I think it's so easy, especially when we have like such visibility of our competition and what they're doing.
Well, do you know what? I was thinking about this the other day, because obviously Rifai, Jess Hunt,
Yeah.
Jenna, they are incredible and their success is so inspiring. But I see so many people try and emulate what they do as an aesthetic. So many people, not necessarily people, but brands. And that works because that's Jess. That is Jess Hunt through and through. And it's been Jess for years. And I see smaller brands trying to do it. And I get it. It's like something to look up to and you might enjoy that aesthetic yourself. But if your brand or your product doesn't really reflect that aesthetic, how are you going to try and emulate it as like the personality of the brand? So you can't ever really try and replicate what someone else is already doing, because it's doing well for them because it's them. So it's about finding what will do well for you because it's you. And I think that's something that I see so often, and something that I'm very proud of myself when it comes to Made by Mitchell, because we don't do it like anyone else, you know. We don't try and follow a trend of like, this is what people are doing right now, let's do this as well. We've kind of actually opposed trends in so many ways, and I think that is really what's allowed us to stay afloat in such a saturated industry, because it really is when it comes to cosmetics.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I think that it's really easy, especially when you're starting out in an industry, to think that certain brands are successful because they look a certain way. And don't get me wrong, aesthetics are important and brand is important, but brand is true to that brand.
Absolutely.
And it is for exactly that reason. It's like, yes, that might work and that might be hugely trending right now, but it's also particularly working for them because, as you say, it's authentic to them and it's authentic to that business. And yes, it might get you some, especially if you can undercut, like that might get you some cash. Like if you're able to do like some great dupes or whatever, it might get you some cash. It probably won't build you into a brand of like tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think when I started, I was so obsessed with the fact that like I'd stepped away from brand work to make my own brand, that I'd been like, because I think it's different with makeup. You can wear lots of different makeup brands and no one's going to be like, oh, that's weird. If I wore loads of different activewear brands, people would be like, oh.
Yeah, no.
Because it's not, you know, like, as in it is different. You're using so many products on your face. As in, so I would be so obsessed with this kind of idea of like, well, this brand's really successful and they're doing this, and this brand's really successful and where they're doing this. And I think at the beginning, then even though we had like our really clear parameters that I was very proud of and why I kind of started the business, I think there were definitely a few years when I was like, okay, actually what we are currently is like an amalgamation of all of these different brands rather than our own brand. Yeah. And I really needed to strip it back from that to be able to get back on like a successful path.
So that's such a skill to even be able to notice that, though, because some people don't notice it. And I think that can be so detrimental to the final destination of where a brand is going. But I think it takes a lot to be able to actually realize that for yourself and to tell yourself and to act on that and make a change on it, because I think, you know, it's so easy to compare, and I do it most days, you know, but it's about reminding yourself, I don't know why I'm comparing. Yes, we're in the same industry, but we're not the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a valuable aspect of comparison in that, you know, comp shopping has always been something huge in every industry. Like, you see what all the other brands are doing so that you can work out what consumers are liking and all of this. That's helpful. Comparison to the detriment of like, now I need to follow means you're always going to be following. Like, you're never going to be the one setting the trends if you're always doing that. And I think that's something that I had to learn for sure, because I was like, social media is so trend led that we've always got to be at the forefront of the trends, and that means we're always actually slightly behind fast fashion. Then I'm like, well, that doesn't work, because we're more expensive than fast fashion. So I'm like,
But it's so true though, and again, growing into, and I think it's maybe a little bit different in fashion as well, because there is the element of fast fashion, which is just a whole other world in itself, isn't it? And I think I have a lot of friends that have fashion brands or fashion lines, and I think they probably all have very similar feelings to what you've just expressed, because again, it's just a different world of how quick things can be turned around.
Right, exactly.
In the fashion world, isn't it?
This is why I always say, I'm like, if I ever see a design on one of our design decks that I'm like, I think I'm like, there's no world in which we're going to be able to compete with fast fashion at that time, because that is the exact type of design that's going to be, they're going to be rolling that out in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
So
of course.
actually that's not even worth it for us, because we know we can't sell cheap, because we're well priced, but we can't sell cheap.
Do you think there was ever a time where you would have that the same observation and think, but we're still gonna do it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think there were so many things where I was like, that's so on trend, we're doing that then.
Yeah.
And actually, no, it was on trend for fast fashion, which meant that it moved immediately. And actually, then we were too slow and we were too expensive, because obviously we're very different in terms of production and materials and all of those things. And I think that we were constantly playing this catch-up game, and I'm like, why am I trying to compete with fast fashion? Because I'm slower, more expensive, like all of the good things as well, but like that's not, we're not trying to compete on getting there first. That's not the metric here. And I think that was really important as a learning as a founder.
Very important. But again, I think that's something that I even find that interesting hearing that, because I probably don't I don't really look at it as a trend in a sense, because I think cosmetics is different.
It is different, for sure.
It is. We don't really create a product based on a trend in a sense. There's definitely trending looks and things like that, but I think when it comes to formulations, it's not as much so that way. Skincare is different. Korean skincare is like all the thing at the minute, and then it's got to go into sea beauty and all this kind of stuff. But I think when it's more so just based around color cosmetics, it's kind of whatever you want it to be and whatever makes you feel good. So it's really interesting to hear that that process, what you've been through.
Yeah, I would even say then on top of that is just then knowing your industry, because if I'd known my industry better, I would have been able to know what I should and shouldn't be competing in. Whereas like you could probably spend more time investing in like understanding why something's a trend, because actually it's not a trend, it's just a really good product, and then being able to learn from that. Whereas like I was constantly chasing my tail for a good few years, and I was like, oh, it's not.
That's okay though. That's I think every business founder or anyone that is even just creating something that is something different, I think we've all probably been there, and if not, everyone's going to be there at some point.
Exactly. And you've said before that when you were younger, you were put down a lot for being quote unquote too much. But obviously, you've also like, it's kind of quite clear that that's exactly who you are, and exactly that has led to all the success that you've had now. How do you kind of think about that? Like, how do you reconcile that when you look back at what you went through?
Do you know what? I look back at it and I think this is a story that needs to be told, because I am certainly not the only person that has ever been told that you are too much. Whether it's because you're too flamboyant and you're gay and you love rainbow eyeshadow, or whether you're just loud. Like, there's so many people on this planet that
we're just two people yelling at each other right now.
Literally, let me speak. But that's something that I know, no matter who you are as a person, and no matter why you are too much, I think it's so important for people to hear that story, because I was told I was too much for so many years, and there probably was times where I decided to turn it down, but that's just not me. I'm not too much to be getting attention. I'm too much because I can't bloody help it. I probably would like to tone it down sometimes, but
I'm exhausted too.
Yeah, no, literally, give me a break. But I think now, as I've matured and as I've got older, and I do think I'm definitely mellowing as I'm becoming more in tune with myself, and maybe more involved with myself, to the point that I don't always have to be trying to get someone's attention, because I was ignored for so many years. So maybe that is sometimes why I was being too much, quote unquote, because if not, nobody would listen to me, So no, literally, do you know what I mean though? But I think now that I feel like I've gained my own respect for myself, I don't always have to be too much. But I think now my brand embodies too much. It's expressive, it's out there, and I completely celebrate that now. So I hope people take that, and whether it's because you're too much or whether it's because you're too quiet, like that doesn't mean that it's something wrong with you. It's just who you are, and the moment that you accept who you are, that's when the world starts to accept it as well. And even if they don't want to tolerate it, they can accept it, and they just maybe don't be your friend or sit across from you at a table. But I think that's a real powerful thing in life, to just accept who you are and start to love who you are. And I think that is something I've done over the last 4 years. And my approach to anything I do in life is completely different now because of it.
And what do you think has played a big role in you becoming so confident, I guess, in spite of the fact that people have called you too much for a long time?
I think it is, not to make it all about accomplishments, but I think my accomplishments that I've worked my ass off to achieve I think it is them because, you know, whether it's about being the cringe band on TikTok to now what we're doing now over the next year, it's going to be an insane year. And that to me it's my being like, okay, I'm glad I trusted myself. I'm glad that I didn't change it up because nobody else was doing that at the time. I'm glad that I really stayed on live for 12 hours a day. I'm glad that I did that because at the time I'm not going to lie, there was times where I felt stupid because I was being told, oh no, this is never going to last. This is that. So yeah, I think it is an accomplishment sometimes, and that's what makes me then look at it and think, thank God that I did not change, and thank God that I didn't take someone else's advice. Thank God I did what felt most natural to me in that moment.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm glad you say that because we've spoken on this podcast before about how doing good things and proving to yourself that you are not only a good person but also like a hardworking person, like a generous person, whatever it might be, that is so effective for building self-worth and self-confidence. And we've had the rebuttal before of like, yes, but you should have unquavering like self-worth. And it's like, yeah, absolutely you should. But a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And like I, for one, definitely don't and haven't always had like, you know, unwavering self-worth. I think that I've built that over time by building who I am and knowing who I am because I say I'm going to do something and I do it.
And you do it, yeah.
And I think that we underestimate how important it is not to be telling ourselves we're going to do one thing and not following through because if that was a friend who did that to you, you wouldn't trust them, you wouldn't be confident in them. So why do we think that the other way around?
Yeah, I actually watched a podcast before actually. Someone was reacting to a podcast and they said, if you want to achieve something, when you wake up, do it then. Don't wait, do it then. And I think that was like, I was like, oh my God, because I'm sure you wake up some days and you think, oh my God, I can't do this today. This is just not what I want to face today. But I listened to it and there's been a few things just over the last few years where I've probably have turned it away for a little bit longer than probably what I should have. And imagine just facing it there and then. That's when life becomes easier. And it also becomes more authentic as well because it's true and it's exactly what you are.
Yeah, and I don't know whether this is just like kind of like old generation really getting into my head, but I do think there is like more and more of a self-confidence crisis kind of coming through in generations, and I wonder how much of that as well, like I think there are lots of different parts of it, and I think social media plays a role, and I think that there's so many different things play a role, but I do wonder how much of that is because we've increased convenience and the ability to not need to do a lot in lots of scenarios. Like a lot of the time you don't need to get up to entertain yourself. You don't need to move and do that thing. You don't need, like everything can be so convenient.
Everything is at the tip of our fingers, isn't it?
Exactly. And so we don't prove ourselves that, like, we don't give ourselves these little dopamine hits in the day to prove that we are a capable person. And that might sound so stupid because like, yeah, you don't need to do the dishes to prove you're a capable person.
Yeah.
But actually if that's something you put off again and again and again and you hate the fact that your kitchen always looks like shit, like,
but you're not doing anything about it.
Like we do have our own roles to play in building our own confidence.
Absolutely.
And I worry about the amount of increased convenience and what that does to the ability to prove ourselves.
I think there's a lot of, in today's society as well, especially with our generation as well. And even sometimes when I speak to my friends, there's a lot of like a lack of self-blame sometimes. And I think that sometimes is where things do become very just in like a real lapse of never wanting to help yourself. And I think it's if you can never admit that something might be your fault, that's when it just spirals and spirals and spirals. And not everything is everyone's fault, of course. Not everything is your fault, not everything is my fault. It is really just trying to, instead of blaming other people and other situations, where is that going to get you at the end of the day? Sometimes it's about taking ownership and saying, I put myself in a situation and now I'm going to take myself out of it, whether I created it or not.
Yeah.
And I think that self-power on yourself and also self-accountability is so important. And I think through having a business, that is something that has become so apparent that is so important, because if I don't get up and get to work, things don't work. You know,
you're forced to be a self-starter.
Yes,
sure.
no, literally. But sometimes being forced to do something is, in my opinion, that's always been like my best way to do something, because I didn't have a choice in that time. You know, whether it was, you know, starting singing in pubs and clubs where nobody was listening, like that would have never have led to me doing X Factor, which would have never have led to me starting makeup. So, you know, being forced to be out of your comfort zone is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It really is.
Yeah, I love that. And before we finish, I'd love to know what the best piece of advice is that you've ever been given.
Best piece of advice. It's very simple, but just be yourself. And even when you don't know who yourself is, just keep striving to find yourself. But truly, that is, I think, something that anyone can take in their own way. And I don't think advice always has to be super complex. And I don't think it always has to be riveted in about complexities and big words. I don't think it has to be like that. But being yourself is truly, it's a superpower that only you can have.
Yeah.
And I think if we were all super men, super women, that would be the human way of being a superhuman, you know, just being yourself. And I hope one day that we can see everyone just being themselves, because we do live in a world of people not striving for themselves, you know. But yeah, that's my greatest piece of advice that I will always tell myself, even on the days where I aren't so being myself, you know, because that does happen.
Yeah. Oh, I'm big on that. Well, thank you so much. You've been incredible. Thank you so much for coming.
No, such an honor. Thank you.